So, Finny, so tell me about like where you came from. So, you're obviously down in Silicon Valley today, but where did you come from, and kind of like how did you end up in the space you're in?
Oh, wow. Well, I was born in Dubai in United Arab Emirates. My parents were there. I'm from India. Um, you know, the working class in Dubai is all Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshi folks. So we we built the city. Yeah, so when I was about 10 years old, my parents went back to India. So I grew up in India for some time. Came to the U.S. for my um, master's in education here. Yeah, and it started working at church. Came to the Bay Area again for my education for a PhD program in Berkeley in religion, and came to the church. My role at the church is um, everything outside the walls of our church in Santa Clara County. So I get to work closely with local government, nonprofits, faith communities to see what the needs are and how we can coordinate and collaborate faith communities' efforts to places where there's need. So that's what I do. And in 2020, after COVID, realized we could do more for low-income communities. Usually, when we think about poverty, we think about homelessness because that's what people see. I realized that the working poor, who's just one accident or illness away from actually being homeless, uh, actually don't have any resources. And interestingly, most of them are also folks who are undocumented, so they don't get any support from the government. And so realized we could do more, and that led to creating this organization and figuring things out.
So that organization, we call it CAP SV, but you have it here as the Coalition to Alleviate Poverty, right?
That's right. Yeah, the goal here is to work with local government, nonprofits, philanthropy, business, and faith communities to kind of collaborate on adopting communities of poverty. It is interesting that we still have places where folks who have means live and folks who don't have lives in different places. I'm from India. I have not seen that because all of us are poor, so the whole area is just like how everyone lives. It may be a little different in big cities, but even in big cities, like the richest person in India has a house of the cost of constructing that house was 1.3 billion dollars, and right next to him is folks who are in poverty. So this is the kind of stuff that I have grown up with. But here, it is interesting that the more rich you're in the mountains, and then it just comes down, down, all the way down, and to pockets of poverty. And then I realized that is also systemic, because places like Silicon Valley and San Jose, you these are folks who are working in our communities. If they stop working, our economy will stop. But we cannot have them every day driving from Tracy to here. So we need spaces like that. And that opened my eyes and realized that at least people with faith and faith background can do more in caring for them. So we realized that what does it look like to adopt these pockets of poverties and serve them in a strategic way?
Yep. So I want to kind of dive into that a little bit. So the pockets of poverty, you guys don't parachute in, rescue people, and then jump out, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a collaborative effort with many organizations working together, not one trying to be the superhero, but you guys are working together. And then you're also tracking outcomes in terms of the outcome for you guys isn't necessarily getting rid of the pockets for poverty, but measuring people as they transition out of desperate poverty into livable wages and more sustainable living. Is that right? You're measuring how quickly we can help people in those pockets start to achieve community success.
Yeah, there are two, three things you mentioned there, and I will talk a little bit about measuring too and what we are trying to measure as well. Um, yeah, I quickly realized one of the things that as faith communities we do wrong was we go into spaces thinking that we want to do something for people, right? There's a difference between doing something for people and doing something with people. And so we recognize that the right approach with that holds their dignity, which is a very important part in poverty alleviation, is to learn how to work with the community. And these are folks who are actually smart and much more resilient than most of us. They have figured out how to work, how to live with very less, and with all kinds of situations that's going on in their lives, and they have things to offer. So we learn how to work with them. The way we do that is by kind of creating or helping communities, if they don't already have, creating neighborhood associations where they are the leaders of the community. And neighborhood association is kind of like a nonprofit, so government can directly work with them and bring resources to them. And so we work with them. And if they don't have that already, we kind of empower them to do that. How do we measure? This is one thing also I learned. Everyone who is in that collaborative space need to measure things differently. What nonprofits measuring should not be what faith communities should be measuring. That should not be what government should be measuring, and that should not be what businesses should be measuring, right? And I realize that one of the things that volunteers and people who come into these spaces because their faith prompts them to come voluntarily, one of the things that they need to measure is the importance of relationship building and acknowledging dignity in the process of poverty alleviation. Because poverty alleviation is not only about just giving some money. If that was it, we should have fixed it. Because I believe that America is the richest country in the world and can figure that out. But that's not it. It's not just about money or material lack. It is also a relational brokenness between folks in their community, in their families, within themselves, addiction, all kinds of stuff. And I believe that folks who are coming from faith communities and volunteers can lean into the humanity of the person, listen to them. That goes slowly, and if consistently for a long time, that is much more healing than getting $100,000, and would make much more resilient people, strong people that we need in our community. So what we are measuring is, what does it look like for our engaged volunteers? How many people are they connecting with? How many names they know? How many people are there in relationship with for a longer time? Not just coming and showing up for a food pantry and going, but that sustaining that relationship for a year or two. So that is what we are measuring. Nonprofits should measure case management, tons of food, all that stuff. So that is the nature of measurement.
Got it. So, um, I guess the question that I think I heard in this was, um, the governments and the community groups want to fix a problem,
Mm.
and they stay long enough to fix the problem. The community groups need to build lifelong relationships and
Mhm.
surround the individual. So while they do fix their personal problems, we don't want to leave them isolated. So there's recidivism issues,
Absolutely.
right? Because they will, what the blind spot that they found the first time, they will bump into it the second time unless there's people around them that will help them see those bumpy roads, right?
Yeah, so in 2 years of doing this, I've talked to several local government officials, politicians, and others, and all of them have mentioned that they can create policy, they can do things, but they cannot figure out or even hire people to build relationships and trust. That has to come from volunteer effort. And I think that's what people of faith and faith communities can bring into this collaborative space of poverty alleviation. We may not bring millions of dollars or policy change or advocacy, but we can bring a very critical element here that folks are forgetting, which is an important part of solving this problem.
And part of that is, we've outsourced our caretaking to
Mhm.
many professional groups,
Right.
and we just need to get back into taking care of our neighborhoods together, right?
Yeah.
And I think you can appeal to a lot of the faith-based organizations to make them aware that, their skill sets are super needed. So there's one comment in here about, place-based asset base. What does that mean? We hear that a lot coming out of the San Jose area, place-based asset based.
Mhm.
In your mind, does that translate to how the poverty pockets are different from each other and what their strengths are, their weaknesses? Is that what the asset place-based?
Yeah, place-based, asset-based work basically mean like you have a geographical location that you can literally map out. I also want to a shout out to Lorenzo. He used to be here my last time when I came. He is working with some students in Stanford and actually helping me create a map where we can just put our zip code and find where the poverty pockets are based on household income. So thank you to Lorenzo. He's doing it as a like for free. This is like very costly thing that he's working on, but he is helping me figure that out. That'll really help us to vision cast and help people understand where these poverty pockets are. What I mean by place based is the moment when folks understand that there is a location to the to the areas that they want to serve and bring resources to, it is easier to vision cast and help people understand what are we looking for, where the problem is. And it is also obvious because within city limits, the city folks knows where these places are. So there's the most amount of gun violence happening, gang violence happening, all kinds of. So in the city's mind and in like police officers and others, they have this mapped out. In San Jose, it used to be called as hotspots. Now they have a different word for it, like something else. It's I think so. They call it opportunity spots or something like that. Right? It's just, I mean, it's the same thing. So what I realized that once we have a place, a location identified, there are folks willing to really invest in and bring their services into it and know that that's the place that they're trying to serve. And it becomes very specific. Asset-based means is that we don't need things from outside to come inside to these communities. These communities already have things to solve their problems. Not just that, they have individuals who have assets and skills that because the culture has always been, I will receive something from there. They themselves have forgotten the fact that I can actually solve some of these issues. I actually have better resilience than most of the people who are coming and serving me, right? So that's what I mean by asset based. For example, the in many of these poverty pockets, space is a big issue, like where to gather, where to meet for their families to run around, and faith communities actually have space, but they've never seen faith community space as an asset for their community. They just saw that, oh, that's just this corner place a bunch of people come on Sunday. We don't want to go there, right? And so trying to help the community understand that that is their asset. Technically, it is theirs, even like tax-wise and all of that. It is a public space, even though it is run by a group of people when the worship is happening and other times. And so that changed when I say asset-based. I'm helping them to understand they have their own ways of fixing problems. And once we have that, it increases dignity, it reduces cost. You don't have to bring millions of dollars from outside to fix these things, and it involves them in problem solving. So that's what we mean by place-based. So it is a very well-known thing. It's called ABCD, asset-based community development. Is a very like 80, 90-year-old idea, and we just starting to use it in some of these places in Silicon Valley because not usually there is not much poverty that is seen, and I'm just trying to get folks to see these things.
And you don't look 80, but man, you look good.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So talk about the poverty, the fact that most people think that because we're in Silicon Valley, there is no real poverty problems.
Yeah, yeah, and this is I'm also listed this as an opportunity to vision cast to mostly faith communities for them to get more involved. So many people actually think there is no poverty in Silicon Valley because we have now what, $3 or $4 trillion companies, and in the midst of it, we also have real poverty. If you take the next slide, yeah. So this is a stat that we follow in Santa Clara County and San Mateo County. If you have a household income of $117,000, it's considered to be low income. And if it is 60,000 or less, it's considered to be extremely low income. We have over 60,000 families who are in the extremely low income category. Now, this means these are not homeless folks. These are hardworking people who earns that much and still live here. And their contributions is very much important for the city and our communities to move forward. But that's the income level that mostly government and others, no one is trying to support them. They're just trying to figure this out by themselves. So these communities exist in our area. And I found out that many of the people that I talk to, they're not aware of the fact that these folks exist in our community. 60,000 is, we are talking about close to about 400,000 people. Out of it, 150,000 are children. So there is child poverty here. It's just that we don't want to, we have not communicated it, we haven't said it. We talk about, you know, money and billion-dollar stuff and all of that, that in the midst of it, these facts are missing. So one of our hope and goal is to help people understand that there is poverty exists in Silicon Valley.
I know in my own town, we have a pocket that is hidden from the city that's within a few blocks of downtown because they work all the hard jobs,
Yeah.
the blue collar jobs, but
Yeah.
they live 3 and 4 families to an apartment.
Yeah, one more thing, if I can just share. And it is also a problem in the places that I work with, right? So I have heard religious leaders, pastors, priests who have said that they actually have completely even forgotten that there are pockets that are suffering because we can drive around it, we can ignore it, right? Because poverty is under the shadow of wealth in Silicon Valley. And it's a tough kind of poverty, right? If everyone are poor, it's different. But when you are in the shadow of wealth, that affects mental health and all kinds of things that help you to flourish and move forward. So one of the things I want to focus is to help people understand that there actually poverty exists and we need to do something about it.
So, what about systemic issues? I mean, what are the systemic effects that happen with these pockets?
Yeah, and so and that's one thing I just mentioned a while ago, that because these are areas that low-income communities live, most of the time the average person asks, why are they living there? Why can't they go into a place where they can afford? Or why can't they go, to a faraway place or another state? California is costly, just move. But the fact is that everyone else around actually need them there to run the city and this community, right? Folks who are in taking care of our gardens or our streets or restaurants. These folks cannot drive every day 2-3 hours to come here and work. So the folks who live here, all of us, even though we are not aware about it, we want them to live here, and the only place they can live is in these uh, areas they can afford, that we call poverty pockets, right? So it's actually a systemic issue. No, it cannot be fixed. I have even read some of the history part of it, that you need these kind of disparities to somehow run communities. It's always been there. Historically, it has been there. But my thing is, we need to at least acknowledge it. We cannot ignore it. We have to acknowledge that there are pockets of poverty, and it will be there. And what can we do from our side, our part, to make sure that they're not suffering and they're moving forward and they have upward mobility. So that's the systemic stuff that
Got
I've
it.
seen.
So, oftentimes they're isolated because they're in poverty pockets. They don't have networks of people that can think about their skill sets and introduce them to alternative jobs, new
Yeah.
people that can get them out of the current living environment. And I think that's one of the big things with the volunteers, right?
Yeah, and I always talk about this as proximity. Proximity gives you opportunities. It is fascinating to me that I'm from India, like 7,000, 8,000 miles away, and we use our phones, right? Whatever phones that we use. Some of Apple is like 5 miles away from a poverty pocket that I serve at. Some of the kids in there are not even aware that the headquarters of Apple is like literally 5 miles away from them, right? So proximate, not being aware that they're actually proximate to something pretty amazing that is happening around the world is a problem. And I think that's injustice. And I think folks needs to help even young folks, youth, and people who are living in these communities know that they have something to offer here. They're actually living in a place where there is opportunity, and they can actually flourish. And if we ignore it, if we don't care about it, this is the next generation or the future who will continue in the cycle of poverty.
And the visible poverty will be people on the streets,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Unhoused. So, the problem with traditional organizations is we used to ask people to come to us.
Mm.
Like we would create an office, put it on the far side of town, and expect people to get in a car and find their way to this office, and then it's closed or it's not the right person. And it was a runaround, right? When all of these centralized organizations were running. Um, your model's a little different. Maybe you talk about the collaboration and bringing it to the community.
Yeah, yeah, and so there are systemic effects of poverty here, and one of the ways to I thought to tackle it was to get volunteers and our church communities into where these poverty pockets are, and to basically adopt it. Again, the idea comes very much from my faith tradition, which actually says go and serve people. It doesn't say come and see what's going on. And so it's just a basic thing that I realized from my reading of the scripture. And so yeah, so the idea is to ask folks to go where the pain is, be the presence. And I think so presence is a very powerful healing matter. People, especially with digital stuff, that we have taken away human presence into problems. Also, I have seen compassion, when it is done at scale, it ignores the humanity of the person that you want to serve, right? Because you just want to do things at scale. I mean, everybody wants to do things. Let me tell you that. There's a fire in LA. Every single person want to do something about it. But for just this is something. I'm a preacher, so I'm going to preach 1 second here. Compassion comes from the Latin word, um, suffer with. That is the meaning of compassion. To suffer, it's a relational term. So if you take away the relation aspect of compassion, it will turn into nihilism. It will turn into compassion fatigue. So that's why you constantly hear, you will never fix the homelessness issue. We'll never fix the prison issue, because people have compassion fatigue. The reason there is compassion fatigue is because you're not willing to suffer with the person who's out there. So what we're trying to do is to bring relational work back for healing, not just throwing money into it. So to do that, we have to go there rather than be here and micromanage what's going on there.
So while you originally kind of targeted churches because they gather and invite, it's not exclusively isolated to churches. There's an open invitation, but churches tend to be a place where you can go to get large volunteers. But the invitations are out for anybody who's concerned, wants to participate. So you don't necessarily isolate yourself from other groups, right?
Oh, absolutely not. And yeah, no, we have to work with everybody here. And church is an asset that the people need to use, because there's volunteers, there is generous people out there who wants to help financially. There is actually land that can be used. So there's a lot of things that the faith communities can bring into it. But it is also important to know the way that I am working on this is not having mass amount of volunteers. I started using this term called engaged volunteers. So we are looking at 4 or 5 people who are committed to consistently show up into this community for the next 5 years. That is much more powerful than having 500 volunteers on a weekend,
Yeah.
right? And that is much more healing and helpful and relational building and all of that. So what we are trying to do is to get engaged volunteers who have a heart and a vision for this place, train them up, and connect them with the leaders in the community, and ask them to show up whenever they need.
That's pretty cool. 5-year commitment. That's good. Amazing. So we're breaking down the silos, right? This is where a lot of organizations kind of worked in isolation. They didn't necessarily work together. Everybody recreated the wheel because they're going to solve the problem by themselves and be the superhero. You're just dismantling that, right? You don't want a single organization to solve this problem. You want this to be a communal investment, right?
Absolutely. And I'll give you an example, because I work mostly with faith communities. I identified a pocket of poverty. There was a faith community who I shared about, hey, I think so you should adopt this place. And they said, we are big enough. We're just enough. We'll just come and do everything that you want. And I said, you're not the right partner, because you have to work with another smaller congregation, the local government people, nonprofit folks. You just have to work with everybody to make this happen. And that's not just only about humility, that's just also smart, because no one organization can fix this, or no one vision can fix it. It's from my language, it's brokenness cannot be fixed by just one idea. It needs everybody to come together. So it has to be a collaborative effort. At least in the faith communities, we've been trying and doing our own stuff for way too long. And we have to change the way we are doing stuff, learn how to play ball with others, and bring what is our strengths into the table, and receive what others have to offer. So, and I've also found that when we have the right partners together, planning things together, it's very powerful and unifying, and there's no sense of I'm here to get a name or fame or none of that. The right people are there trying to do the right things, and the community trusts them when we collaborate. So I found that there's a lot of work that has been gone, and not because it's not collaborative, there's repetitive stuff going on, money is being wasted, time is being wasted. But when it's collaborative, it's much more powerful.
Yeah, speak to that a little bit. Like you have different types of groups that you're working with, and how do those bubbles kind of bleed over and blend together? And do you have an example of how you've pulled those communities together?
Yeah, I can give you one example in the Cadillac Winchester community in San Jose. Literally, all these organizations have come together. So, local government created in San Jose, city of San Jose, have created a department called Project Hope. Project Hope is working with Parks and Recs department to create neighborhood associations. So that is their mandate. So they would go into low-income communities and help the low-income communities create neighborhood association. We work with the neighborhood associations, which is actually people in the community, to kind of solve their problems that they bring. So they'll be like, we would like to have a large community gathering where families and children and come together and watch a movie, let's say. So the adopted faith communities come together to give resources. Either it could be financial or volunteer or space or whatever. Government have brought their folks through Project Hope. Businesses. So during Thanksgiving, a local store, grocery outlet, donated 100 turkeys for the community. So we didn't ask the church to donate something. They actually did, and they said, this is why we are here, is because we want to serve, but we can't organize it. Thank you for doing it. And so they came. And then again, what happened is I asked the churches to communicate to go and buy from grocery outlet, because that is another way of supporting the community, right? You don't have to just give a check to someone who's in need. You can indirectly actually support that community. So this is a good example of how literally every, and then philanthropy. There is one person who heard about the work, like a builder, and wanted to financially support some of the needs, and so they stepped in. And they're also excited because it's going directly to the need. It's not coming in between and going through organizations and stuff like that. So that was a good example of how all these organizations work together.
That's very cool. So tell me a little bit about how you're restoring and building these individuals and getting people back to a healthy spot.
Yeah, and this is one of the thing. And next slide. I believe that um, relational stuff needs to be at the center of poverty alleviation conversation. Not just material stuff, not just money and resources. We need to bring the conversation about the importance of relationship in alleviating poverty. And if you're just giving stuff, at some point it's going to hurt. But the fact is that all of us are poor in some way, either material, emotional, mental, spiritual. In some way, we all are poor, right? Material poverty is the only thing that news and community and government and others highlight, because the reason is some of that spills into the street and we get uncomfortable. That's actually the reason, not because folks want folks who are low income to have $100,000 in their bank. It is because they're like, oh, their problem is starting to come into the street and it's affecting me, so let's do something. That's the heart of it. But the problem of poverty is actually a relational issue, and we want to highlight that. And to do that is by honoring and respecting the humanity of this person. From a faith perspective, we believe that every single human being is created in the image of God, hence carries worth and value, not because they have money or resources or power. They are created in the image of God, and so anybody, whoever it may be, they carry value and worth, and we need to help them and support them. So that's what we want to bring into the table is the importance of relationships.
Nice. Well, we have a three-stage model that's very similar to this when we
Hmm.
go out to folks that are broken, when they come to us for restoration, and then when we work with them so they can thrive and preserve in those healthier spots, working through some of the
Yeah.
systemic issues that will always be there, but working through those trauma points so that it doesn't produce what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, I can actually. I mean, there are several stories, but I've heard stories of families, especially a single mom, going through all kinds of situation because of children who are that she needs to take care, undocumented, so she can't actually work. She has to do, things differently and taking care of other homes and stuff like that. And she got into one of these training sessions that we did about parenting and what are some of the strategies on how to communicate well with your children, right? And her kids are growing in America, and she doesn't even know the language properly, and trying to work through this. And at the end of it, after 7 weeks, we had somebody teaching, but we also had our engaged volunteers walking with this person for 8 weeks. She did say that she has better coping skills on managing the situation, but she never said her lack was money, right? None of people who are actually poor would say that they're poor because there's a money issue. They have a emotional, relational, spiritual, mental, anxiety that if someone is willing to walk with them, then they're resilient people. They can run with things. And she's thriving. She's working now. Kids are in school, doing well. What we did was to walk with her for 8 weeks, and that's what I talk about, the relational part in poverty alleviation.
So imagine with us, like,
Yeah.
speak to your imagine slide, like where do we end up, and what's your goals, and what are the themes that you're kind of focused on?
Yeah, I mean, I think this organization at some point, should its work should end. That's when you know that something is happening is right, and I would say it would end if all low income communities in Silicon Valley. And when I say Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, I think it's a very doable thing. Um, is somehow connected with caring people, organizations, and adopting them and knowing their problems so that their voices are heard by a larger group of people and someone is actually caring for them. So one of our metrics is to see faith communities basically adopting all low-income communities and poverty pockets in Silicon Valley to care and to do the relational work for folks who are in need. I hope if we can do that, that'll be pretty amazing. I think it's a very doable thing too.
So how do we get started? What's a good way for us to get involved or learn more?
Yeah, so the primary audience that I basically work with and give vision to are either in the four categories: faith communities, local government, nonprofits, business. The right next step, I would say, is we have a training, which is basically about it's a faith-based training, trying to help you understand why you need to care for the poor. People have all different kinds of reasons for it. Some has because they are guilty, they have too much money, they have to do something about it. Some folks need to do something because they feel like their God is going to do something to them. All of that is wrong motivations, right? What is the right motivation to actually serve? We talk about justice. We talk about generosity as the way to fix the issue. And finally, how to communicate love and God's love. So we have a small little training that helps people to get there. If you're a nonprofit, there are four areas that we're working on: education, employment, financial literacy, and health. Health, we're focusing on mental health. So if you're in any of these areas, I would love to talk, and I can connect you. If you're a business, this is a great opportunity to literally adopt a poverty pocket and give your resources and whatever you would love to give directly to the people, right? There is no in between person and work. And if you're a local government person, I think so. Your government should actually have a thing like Project Hope, because I'm actually working with a new guy who just went to Washington D.C., Sam Liccardo. He's part of Silicon Valley. He's the one who created Project Hope in San Jose, and I told him that we need Project Hope literally in all counties in Silicon Valley. He wants to do it, It'll take some money, like 30 million or something like that. But he says now Washington D.C. is messed up, nothing is happening. So, but whenever it gets closer there, I think so that is the next step from a 30,000 foot level is for every counties to have Project Hope, because I think so it's a very actually helpful department that'll come from local government. So I'm happy to talk more. Lorenzo is sitting right there. That's the guy who helped me with a Nike cap. So thank you.
So, Finny, thank you so much for coming down here. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing the stories. Love to kind of keep track with you and kind of follow your success. Is there a website we can go and kind of like go
Oh, yeah.
visit?
I do have a nice website that is made by a volunteer. It's capsv.org, capsv.org. And that's the email that you could reach out to, and I will respond.
Excellent. Thank you for coming. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So, did we have questions? Well, Finny, I don't know if anybody had any questions about Poverty Pockets. Okay.
I think that's a first. Anne Marie. Vinny, would you
Vinny, yeah.
mind?
So thank you for what you do.
Yeah.
In addition to the parenting classes, what are some examples of other ways you support people?
Yeah. So there's been the parenting class. There's financial literacy. We're doing like a 7 to 8 week, and all of that. I'm working with nonprofits who are subject matter expertise who would do that. We also have had we're working with a company called Forte that does it's part of the mental health strategy for low income communities. It's not a therapy based thing. It's basically mentoring, but it is over technology, so people can reach like 24/7 and have someone who can walk with them on this. So that is something that is on the works. We're now one of the biggest needs that has come up is the anxiety around immigration, ICE, and all of this stuff. I'm working very closely with pockets of poverties where the majority of folks are undocumented. And so we are doing workshops of know your rights in these places. Now, the nicest thing is that we'll work with the real people who need it because we're working on the ground. So that's an example. Yeah, so those are things at the moment we're focusing on. Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, you had so many quotable moments
Oh.
today. So I was like sitting here just taking notes the whole time. But one of the things you said is when we don't collaborate, ideas are repetitive and money is wasted.
Mhm.
And you're looking to have nonprofits work with faith organizations, work with businesses. How are you getting people to share their intellectual property or their ideas
Mhm.
without them feeling as if they will no longer have a place individually to thrive? Did that question make sense?
Can you talk a little bit more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we run a variety of DAOs here.
Uh-huh.
I, along with Kent in the back, run a recovery DAO.
Uh-huh.
We work with people struggling with addiction on the streets.
Mhm.
When we go to nonprofits who work in that same space, sometimes it's difficult for them to tell us what their game plan is or what their ideas are because they're afraid that if they tell us that, then we'll start doing that.
Ah,
And they'll no longer be able to get funding for that.
got it.
And especially in between nonprofits,
Mhm.
if more than one nonprofit we're working with, they seem to, as
Sure.
would
Yeah,
make
yeah.
sense. So I think my question is, how have you approached this situation to get the interconnection of
Yeah.
all of these four kind
Yeah.
of sectors?
Nonprofits, in my experience, nonprofits are, and I think so, faith communities are notorious of not being able to work with each other. It's just the nature of it. But then I also realized nonprofits are also in buildings, and they are in spaces, and they are not going into spaces where there are needs. They're asking folks to come to them, right? Because we are building trust and relationship in the community. Like I basically choose who's going to come here and collaboratively work, and for that, and I don't know, I've been in San Jose for 7, 8 years. Maybe it is the consistent years of connections that I've had there. We have been working with about 11 or 12 nonprofits so far, and all of them know each other, right? And things like what Ted Haas is doing here with Innovate and other things, most of them have come in there together. I think it is for them to also build trust with each other, even though if they are doing the same work, they need to have a space. Maybe it's a problem that they've never had a space to, sit together and collaborate and trust each other, more than financial stuff, I think, because most of their core financial people like believe in what they do and will continue to give, right? I think so. It's a matter of trust, and what I'm seeing is when they all are around the table and none of them are actually on the ground because they haven't built trust. And if someone is actually building trust and inviting them to the table, for some reason they're not, you know, tight. They're just willing to work, be a little bit more free. I don't know how it'll look like if we can scale. So I haven't never thought about scaling yet. I started in working in 2 local communities with about 6 churches and 3 or 4 nonprofits. Without even attempting to scale, we are in about 10 locations, 22 different churches, 11 nonprofits, I think so 4 businesses. And so I'm still trying to learn the model, and maybe I'll have more to say next year. Yeah, thanks for asking. It's a good question.
Well, thank you. I have been working with homeless for more than 20 years in San Francisco. In the beginning, we don't have homeless, and the government politicians, they are the one driving the homeless, and they need the homeless, the amount of homeless, the number of homeless, to get the money from the public. For example, in San Francisco, an average homeless allotted for $8,500 a month. No one at City Hall want to end homeless in reality because they need the money for themselves. So 60% of the homeless in San Francisco, they're mentally incapable. 60%. Out of the homeless, 15% people are functioning, and more than 50% of the homeless, they are non-local people, which means same with San Jose. Now we know there's a group of people, they're using the homeless, drive them. If they do a body count, they will go to Oakland, and then San Francisco had body count, they will drive them to San Francisco. Same thing with San Jose or LA. So my concern is that homeless is an individual problem if they're functioning, and they all want a home. So with $8,500 a month, everybody should be living in 6-star luxury hotel. And also, 70% of the money go to administration. So no matter what you do, you're not able to solve the homeless problem. No matter what I do, for 20 years, I watch them over and over. It is 205 homeless agency, nonprofit in San Francisco. 70% of the budget goes to administration, management, director, and 30% goes to the homeless service. So no matter what we do, we're not able to end homeless unless we have federal help to indict and arrest the politician and end the homeless budget. So then we can help the homeless really build a home. For that kind of money, we can build all the homes. No one should be homeless in California. So the question is that, will you be able to help and work with high-tech people to really trace the money from the budget 1 to budget 2, and who gets the money and how many homeless? I'm talking about one-time service. Because we know in San Francisco, they go to 10 homeless agency, get one little tiny thing, and they all cost the taxpayer money. So can you help trace the money from the end, point 1 to point B, and really the homeless help?
Sounds like a fantastic thing to do. Not my calling yet, but I know I hear your concern, and that is why when I started working on poverty, I quickly realized homelessness is a whole different thing to do. That is why I'm focusing on low income, extremely low income folks. These are all folks who are actually living in a house and working poor. But your point is very well taken. Someone has to work on this and figure this out, because the fact is, there are some numbers are alarming. Santa Clara County has close to 6,000 homeless people. We have a number for it. Santa Clara County has a bond that is signed $780 million just for homeless. That is only for the county. There is money from the city. Then there's money from the state for 6,000 people. Now, low-income communities, one pocket that I'm looking at is more than 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 people, right? They don't have any resources coming from anywhere. So there is a problem here. Someone needs to look into it, and maybe, figuring out where the money is going is the way to figure things out. Not my calling yet, but thank you. Good question.
Okay, shall we wrap up then today? Thank you so much, Finny. Great conversation. It's always a pleasure to have you. Thank you for the incredible work that you do.